yo.
What's happening?
Yo, how about that bait and switch with
Bro, so
the
I missed it. I'm gonna have to go back and rewatch. What was it? What was the deal?
so they previewed Fulgrim, but like ascended Fulgrim with like the snake and the wings and everything, and everyone was like, "Oh my god!" And then, but then like the Horus Heresy logo pops up, and like the realization where everyone's like, "No." Because like the realization that it's like not going to have 40K rules and it's going to be like resin, so it's gonna be like a pain in the butt and it's going to break and all sorts of stuff like that, and it's going to be like wildly expensive. So it's just like, and they left it towards the end too, and the email even said, the email for the reveals said like Primarch and everything. So
like, is it the 30K Demon Primarch Fulgrim, or is it just like straight Fulgrim?
It's the 30K Demon Primarch Fulgrim.
I mean, it's still kind of dope.
It's dope. Like, but
wow.
now you're gonna be like, okay, this is counts as Magnus, or this counts as Angra, some dumb stuff like that. It's just gonna be like, if you're trying to play Emperor's Children, you're like, he's too big to be like anything else, because he's on like the big 100mm base. I don't know.
There's such troll sometimes.
That was such a troll move. Yeah, I mean, might as well talk about reveals while we're here. What'd you think about the rest of the reveals?
I mean, it's cool. Like Jump Pack Primaris. I think we all at this point should collectively understand that like Primaris is going to equal Space Marine, and that's just going to be it. And like all the old stuff's getting, which I think is good. Yeah,
which is good because there's confusion. I mean, like especially if like newer people getting in, they don't understand that like how long it takes to swap over an entire line, especially a line that big. And so like, well, why are these? Especially if someone just got in 10th edition or into 9th edition, they're like, why are there submarines and the Primaris Marines? What's the difference? Blah, blah, blah. It's to like folks like you or me, it seems like pretty self-explanatory, but like if you're newer, it can be a little bit overwhelming. So anything to ease the onboarding, and the scopes still look good.
They do, yeah. I mean, the primary sculpts just look, anything that's closer to true scale just looks better. So that's fun. And I think like mechanically it also makes things easier because as you're like sunsetting a bunch of these miniatures, there's just like fewer rules, things you have to keep track of and come up with to keep things like feeling creative and unique and new. Better just to like I don't mind sort of squishing it down to add more richness and texture to the existing line. I do. I mean, as always, I feel bad for people who are like, man, I got all these like tactical Marines from back in the day. What am I supposed to do with these guys? I'm sure they're going to be playable for at least a couple years. It'll be all right. But like, those things are like 30 years old at this point. Like,
yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, like they pretty much for the most part, with a couple exceptions, done 1-for-1 replacements. So you can play it. It's not the same as like playing an old pewter like Lord of Change with a new one, where he's like a third of the size, It's just the scales a little. Yeah, exactly. I still have one of those somewhere.
Yeah, oh man, with the straight 10 stat line, that guy was the best.
Yeah, it was just 10. Everything was just 10.
That guy was the best.
Love that. Yeah. So what have you been up to, man?
Chilling mostly. Work. My work is going crazy. But that's, I think, going to be the case between now and like the election, just as a matter of the work. The matter, of course, as a result of the work that I do. And then I've just been chilling. Like we were on vacation in Curacao last week. That was dope. Highly recommend it if you can make the trip out as like a family trip. Super friendly. Folks are nice. The weather's great. It's outside the hurricane belt, which is especially relevant now. And yeah, just like great food, calm beaches, great sand, all that stuff. So that was a good little family trip. Going camping this weekend, which is why I'm missing out on Nova. Excited to hear about your plans for Nova though.
Yeah.
And yeah, my oldest is starting kindergarten at his like new school on Tuesday.
Exciting.
That's it. And then I'm trying to work on see if I can grab one of these guys. Trying to get my formula for black down. that isn't just black, but still registers as black for these Death Watch dudes that I've been working on. Getting that going. That's my like hobby project now, is finishing up some of the new Proteus squads. That's it. That's what I got. How about you, Tim? What's up?
Went to a GT last week. Took Arnie's Germany's Chaos Knight list. It's real simple. It's just 14 dogs. Man, having 28 thermal spear shots solves a lot of issues.
The redundancy, you love it.
Oh my god, it solves so many issues. So getting used to playing that list a little bit, how it's different from my other one. It's kind of nice because it's just whenever you're playing a faction that you've been playing a bunch, and then you try someone else's list, you kind of can it's nice because you're a little bit outside your comfort zone, but you're like a half foot in, half foot out. So it's less mental bandwidth. Like you're still playing the game in front of you, but you're also just kind of thinking like, okay, well, what would I have done with the old list? Like, whereas like what do I have now? Like what are the pros and cons of switching or whatever? So the list had less melee than I'm used to, but I didn't find myself missing it too much. Because the previous list, it cut guns to get the melee, and I found myself having to use the walk through walls strat and the tank shock a lot more to make that melee like reliable.
Right.
Whereas this one, like I didn't really have to do that. Like instead of like kind of sprinting to where I needed to be, it just kind of moseyed forward and just like gradually filled up the board and
apply thermal spears to our targets as needed.
Yeah, and literally, it was great. So that was kind of nice. Which meant because I didn't need the strats as much, I kind of like every matchup, I would kind of be like, okay, well, what strat is important? If they had a Vect, I'd be like, well, what strat is important? And I would try to like get them to Vect the wrong strat, basically. Which is not as hard as I thought it would be to do. Like if you can run down like their source of their Vex, that happened in my CSM game. It was kind of like Cypher was kind of like in the open, and I kind of pushed up, and it was very obvious that Cypher was going to die next turn. So I didn't think I needed the wall strat on that matchup and mission, so I just used it just to like get a little bit closer. And I was like, would you like the Vect? He's like, well, Cypher's going to die next turn, so yes. I was like, cool. And then I ended up using stealth. I ended up using like rotate way more in that mission because I mean, I guess I could talk in the matchups. But in that mission, for that matchup, he was running MSU, no Abaddon, Chaos Space Marines, but it was very shooting heavy.
Yeah.
But just the way where the terrain was, it was GW terrain, and the way the objectives were and everything, I didn't really need to walk through walls because it was chosen battlefield. So basically, I put all the objectives in the open. He put the objectives behind walls, but then I won the roll off to choose sides. So I chose the ones behind walls, and I made him stand in the open to hold objectives.
Womp
womp. Yeah, exactly. So I didn't. So that was good. Yeah, he was a good opponent. He was very friendly. He was very competent. I liked his list. I just kind of like, first round, just kind of like, spoiler alert, I lost that one. Because it was the one where you score a bunch of points for being alive at the end, and I went first. So I was like, didn't really want to do that. So I pushed up because it was awkward because I wanted to push up a lot, but he had the Chosen and the Nurgle Rhino, and he had a big unit Undivided Possessed, and kind of projecting threat, backed up by 2 Forge Fiends, but then he also had like a unit of Undivided Obliterators in reserve. So it's kind of like you want to spread out, but not too much. You want to spread out to block out the Obliterators, but you don't want to just eat the Possessed. Yeah, I think in retrospect, I should have like thrown something out to try to bait out the charge to the Possessed, so that way I could deal with them on my turn too, so that way they're dealt with. Yeah. That way, because I ended up having to deal with them and the Obliterators at the same time, which meant I didn't really have enough time to deal with the Chosen. And then I took tactical, and I got a 0 in tactical turn 1. I got a 0 in tactical turn 5, and then I made a oops. on primary, and it swung the primary by 20 points turn 5. So I ended up losing that one by 11 points, kind of soft through. And by soft through, I mean hard through.
Given like you just listed like a few errors, the fact you only lost by 11 is not a terrible outcome. You must have like been really like playing your ass off. Essentially.
Yeah, the Army just plays primary really well. Yeah, he thought he lost, and then like at the very end, it was just like, "Whoops, I won." But yeah, one of the things I'm noticing is like normally I take tactical because the previous list it kind of wants that little drip of an extra CP or two. This list doesn't really need it as much, so I've been leaning more into going to a fixed, like you do like homers and engage, or homers and bring it down, or engage and homers, stuff like that. And then that way you just get a steady drip of secondaries while you just push the primary differential real hard. Because that army just naturally picks up engage. And then homers is nice because if you're going to play tactical anyhow, a lot of times the action economy when you do tactical is really weird. When you have an army that doesn't want to do action economy, because you'll have like 2 rounds where you don't have to do any actions, and then you'll have a round where all of a sudden you have to do like 2 actions at opposite sides of the board. So it can kind of be like a little bit of like Bernie Hill where you're trying to scramble all over the place. So just knowing that it's just like, okay, well, I just got to sacrifice 1 dog a turn to go into the center and pick up 3 points if I need to. If not, well, or like, homers in the middle for 3, homers in the middle for 3, then no homers turn 3 while I do damage. But then I'm going to make up for it for the next 2 turns by being in the deployment zone for 5. So it goes 3, 3, 0, 5, 5 or something like that. I'm liking that much more. And because I don't need the stratagems as much with this list, I'm enjoying that. My next matchup was Tau. And he reserved too much stuff. It was the ritual, which is rough for Tau into any kind of aggressive army, because to get primary, you had to basically step 9 inches from the center, 10, maybe like 11 inches from the center, and do an action to form your first objective marker.
What was
and
that? Is it like crisis blobs plus lone ops or not?
It was 2 MSU crisis units, and then he had Farsight for 1, he had a Cold Start for another, he had Shadow Sun by himself, he had a Hammerhead, he had some Breachers and Devilfish, he had 2 Ghost Keels, 2 Piranhas, just and some Stealth Suits, just random stuff.
Yeah.
But he started too much off the board, and I went first. So since I knew he didn't have enough damage to really like punish me for being aggressive, I was just like super aggressive because I knew I'd get 2 full turns of just, running all over the board. And then the crisis dropped down. He couldn't really, and he overcharged, and he did a little bit of damage, and then I just killed him. And then we kind of talked about he asked what he could do better, and I was like, look, you just left way too much stuff off the board. I didn't have to respect you. And he came to me the next and then he came up to me the next round. He said we talked about some other stuff, and I guess he won his next game because of the stuff that we talked about. He put into practice immediately, and he won his next game, so he was pretty happy about that.
Just a little bit of free coaching mid event for your opponents.
Round 3, I played Demons. I took. It wasn't like full on big boy, but it was like 3, 4 big boys, and then some medium stuff and some small stuff. It was pretty balanced. And I mean, it wasn't optimized, but there wasn't anything there that like made me like raise an eyebrow. It was like, yeah, those are all like fine units.
This is typical like Delacour, like Shalaxi double.
So off the top, he didn't have Shalaxi, which helped a lot. But he had the Great and Clean one with the enhancement. He had a Bloodthirster. He had a Bellacore. He had a Nurgle Soul Grinder. 2 units of Crushers, a unit of Pinks, a unit of Bloodletters, 2 solo Beasts, and a Skull Cannon, and a unit of Nurglings.
Interesting.
He took Bring It Down and Behind Enemy Lines, and I took Bring It Down and Assassinate, and he left again. He did the same thing. He reserved just too much stuff. Yeah. But he had Bellacore, the Crushers, and the Great and Clean one like right in the line, and then he had some Nurglings like 9 inches outside my DZ on the other side, and the Soul Grinder was like way in the back. So I just deployed on the line because he didn't. Really, the only shooting he had was the Soul Grinder. Yeah. And I was kind of like, well, if Crushers charge, then the Crushers charge. They're units of 3, you know, they're not led by characters, so it won't hurt that bad. They'll do some mortals. And then I went first, and so I just moved up, and Be'lakor and the Crushers were all within 18 of like 3/4 of my army.
Apply thermals.
Yeah, so the Crushers just died. Be'lakor, I dropped him to like 1/3 of his health. The Nurglings, I used the Nurglings to kind of slingshot myself on the objective. Then he pushed up with the Green and Clean one and the Soul Grinder, and he tickled a little bit. And then I killed the Soul Grinder from full health to 0 with 2 Huntsmen because they reroll 1s to wound damage against vehicles and monsters, and they got within +4 damage range. I'd set up to charge too, but I didn't have to. They just killed him with shooting, which was kind of incredible. I didn't think they would go down that easy. And then the Great Unclean one was a chore to kill, but I was like, well, I got to deal with him now before the Bloodthirster comes in, you know, and the pinks and shit like that, because I'm just not going to have a chance to deal with it ever again. So literally the rest of my army, there was like one guy who had fallen back from like a random like Blood Crusher, but like literally the rest of my army just pointed at, I think like 2 guys went to the Soul Grinder, 2 guys went to go chase down Be'lakor, killed him that turn. He was sad about that. Because as soon as you go backwards to Be'lakor, you just kind of like lose.
Yeah,
he just went to a corner. You can't do that with Be'lakor. And then literally 9 dogs popped the Exploding Sixes strat and dedicated their shooting into the Grand Clean one, and I barely killed that guy. But he wasn't in the Realm of Shadow because he moved Be'lakor backwards. If he had moved Be'lakor backwards, that guy would have lived. But he had moved Be'lakor backwards, so he only had the 5 up field of hand, set the 4 up, and he died. Bloodthirster came down, charged, killed a dog. He scored some points, and then my entire army shot the crap out of him. Killed everything else, and I just let the pinks live on an objective. I was like, look, man, I don't want to roll out pinks. Like, I just don't.
Are we doing this?
You just enjoy getting your 3 points for every turn for the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Round 4, I played against Custodes. We played the soccer ball mission, the Servo Skulls, which, man, that mission is something for a tournament.
It's certainly a mission.
It is certainly a mission. So I went first, and then he basically deployed again. You notice a theme here. He just put we just lost Cliff. Autumn back when he comes back. So for the audience, he deployed. He left 2 bricks in reserves. You didn't miss anything, Cliff. So for Custodes, he left 2 bricks in reserves. There's a brick of Terminators, a brick of troops. He started brick of troops on the board on one flank, started a little bit back, and then he had 2 exaction squads and a Calidus squad on the board. So I just deployed him blind because he had no way to do damage to me turn 1.
Yeah.
I went first. I just literally everyone on my left side, I just advanced. Off they went. Just pushed up as far as they could. No shooting. And the other guys, I moved like 2 guys up to grab the 2 objectives. I tried to like just commit as little as possible because the unit that was on the board was the Blade Guard champion unit.
Is Blade Guard plus guard or Wardens?
Blade Guard plus guard. So that unit was a real unit.
Yeah.
So I was like, I basically kind of moved slightly up and then kicked the objectives behind me. And I'm like, well, hopefully he'll just come out and do some shooting and then charge, which will pull his unit out in the open. And then I could just light it up with my entire fucking army.
Yep.
And that, because he only really had 3 bricks. So and he had some MSU shit. And I was like, well, if I kill turn 1 or turn 2, if I just kill a troop unit for free, like now it's game on. It would just be too much momentum. And that's basically what happened. He did some shooting. He charged. He actually failed to kill either of the dogs because they were just too far apart. So he had to like a couple guys coherency.
Yeah.
And he just lost. So they fell backwards. to kind of like my next turn to kind of like screen. Everyone else just ran the servo skulls as deep into his side of the board as he could. And then I lined up. I ran one guy to the center of the board to do some actions for the tacticals. And this is the last event I do tacticals with this list. I'm just going to do fixed from now on.
Mm-hmm.
And then everyone else lined up, popped exploding sixes, and everyone was in like +4 melter range, and you can see the drain from his eyes. And I just killed the entire unit, left the champion on like 2 wounds, and then like a stalker just charged and tank shocked him, and he just died.
That's tough.
And then, but that turn, he rapid ingressed behind me, but the 2 war dogs that had fell backwards were screening him out. The next turn, he moved up, he charged. He was only able to grab those guys, and then basically like tag another. And so I basically left those guys behind. I fell them back like 1.1 inches away and made like vehicles to hold him in my own deployment zone because the home objectives are not worth anything on this one.
Right.
And then everyone just ran the objectives as hard into his deployment zone as he could. And that I killed the exaction squads and I killed like the MSU, like custodies units that came down, like just because, you know, like at that point, like I was just running the primary up so goddamn high. And he took bring down and assassinated, I think, but like I was actively running away from him, so it was like bad. He got like 7 points on primary. And I think I won that one like 90 something to like 30 something or 40 something. I don't know.
Yeah, that's hard. I feel like he needed that list to even be competitive with what you were running. It just wouldn't.
I mean, but like I ran the 14 dog list because I ran to custodies 3 times at War Masters, and I was like, I'm not doing this. I was like, I'm not fucking doing this anymore. I'm bringing 28 thermal spears. I'm fucking done with this nonsense. So, then round 5, I ran into one of my my other teammates. He's a really good guard player. He was running all the indirect, obviously, but he backs it up with a little bit of shooting. He was running 7 sentinels, 2 Demolisher Russes, and a Dorn, and a Chimera. Not a Chimera, a Hellhound, strip cover. And then Earthshakers, Manticores, a couple Basilisks, Horseman, and a command squad. And that was basically it. This is where I kind of was like, yeah, I need to start taking like fixed, whatever. I took Bring It Down and Engage, and retrospect, I should have just took Bring It Down and Homers. Because then I would have gotten it. I mean, he still would have won. He went first, and he just did too much damage. And it was Search and Destroy, so it was like, I don't like Search and Destroy because if you do the deploying the line thing, because it's like a square corner versus like a triangle, they can just kill the stuff that's closest, and then they tag the further stuff with sentinels, and then you lose like 5 dogs turn 1, and then you get pinned in your deployment zone, and then you don't get close. So I actually deployed behind ruin walls on this one, but he went first, and he did too much. He did too much damage, and I moved up, and he tagged him with sentinels, and I ended up getting a gazillion points for. I ended up getting like 10 points a turn on primary for just holding 2, because I was kind of like, okay, well, I'm not going to win this, so I'm just going to go for, for points.
Yeah.
But at this point, I was already 3-2. I was like, well, maybe I'll just be at the top of the 3-2 bracket or something like that. But that was kind of my strategy. Is like once I knew I couldn't win, I was like, well, I'm just going to go for points as hard as I can. It's that differential mindset. But if I had gone Bring It Down and Homers, he wouldn't have been able to stop that. I would have gone like 85 instead of 70. So it would have been an 85-point loss, which if you go 4-1, you get like 85-point loss. Like now you're up there.
Yeah.
So that was it. It was the first run out with the new list. I liked it a lot. Shout out to my boy Gus. When we initiated him to Miami Dice, we went a little too hard on him, and he kind of went back to Sigmar for a little bit. He caught all the hands, but he came back. He was getting to Imperial Knights, and so we were kind of talking back and forth about lists, and I sent him the list that like the Team USA was kind of coming up with. We ended up not taking, but it was Canis, Castigator, Crusader with Thermal, 2 Helverins, a Warglaive, and a Caldus, and I did some light coaching with him. I say light coaching because when I've gone to other people and I've asked for advice, I think sometimes I ask for a little bit too much advice, and then like I try to when people give me advice about stuff, and then I start overthinking it, or I start playing in a way that's contrary to my play style or whatever, I've had a lot of situations where like I've been in contention of an event, and then I start doubting myself, and I ask people that I look up to, and then they give me advice with good intentions, but instead of just trusting my instinct or trusting what's been working up to that point, I try to shift plans now that I'm on the top table, and I've just so whenever every single round when he was asking me, I would just tell him like simple stuff. I'd like, look, man, just don't, if you need cannons to live, use him to make that shoulder the burden strat free, because it goes from 2 CP to 0. Now he's T13. You rotate. He's tough. Don't lose your small guys for free, because then you can't bond. Don't backline your stuff, but also like don't disrespect people and frontline your stuff either. Like you have, for the most part, like the longer the game goes on, the more favored you are, with the exception of Eldar. Like just play your hand. He won a GT. Like he's played 5 games at 10th and he won a GT. Don't going wrong. IK is strong, but like
I love it.
He went through a real run. He played like World Eaters. He played World Eaters, Thousand Suns, Eldar. Yeah, the Eldar player I think was even like possibly like misplaying some rules. Like he was playing the Wraith cans as heavy or something like that, and like still just blasted him out of the water anyhow, like it's just I forgot what his other matchups were, but like it was pretty much like all, he didn't play GSC. I don't think we had a GSC player in attendance, but it was meta stuff. Like it was he went through, with the exception of World Eaters, he went through meta stuff. So
not a layup and got it anyway. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Also,
it was a fun event.
Yeah, that's sick. I love it.
Yep. So the gears feel nice and oiled for Nova. Yeah. And by the way, shout out Ben McJerrick, Laird McJerrick, $2 super chat. Cheering for you to make top cut at Nova. Ben, if I make a top cut with CK, that would certainly be something. But I'll be for it. I'm just gonna do fixed secondaries, deploy the line, and just vibe, because I'm there to vibe. So
appreciate you, Ben.
Yep. We're all waiting for that post status slate meta anyways.
Yeah. Jesus. That can't happen soon enough. God. I was like, remember when the edition first started? I was like, cool. My like fluffy Wraith list will be a thing, and like it won't be bad. Like these rules are so good. And like it literally took like 2 games with Wraith Guard and Wraith Lords and Wraith Knights before I was like, all right, this is not
okay.
This is fucked up. Like I actually can't show up to my local game store and just like play friendly games with anything involving this at all. It won't work. So, and just like on a weekly basis, updating the dashboard and just looking at the results, being like, what is like, how much data is enough? Like, how much data do you need to say enough is enough? Let's make a change. Anyway.
I mean, to be fair, when this I think mid-September is when it's dropping. I mean, traditionally back in 8th edition, when they didn't have like official data slates, they basically just had like, back in like 8th edition, 7th edition, you would just have 2 FAQs and a chapter approved.
And a chapter, that was it.
That was just what you got.
Yeah.
But traditionally, you get one after Adepticon, one after Nova, and then you would get the points changes like after Christmas.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like how the data slate is functioning now, is the way the FAQ used to. So it will, people were like, oh, but maybe before Nova. I'm like, it's not happening.
No, that'd be crazy.
No, Nova is just going to be the bookend of
this meta. Part of
it just is what it is. But I mean, realistically, the edition's only been out for 2 months. So to look at the positive side of it, you remember like that Death Watch change when they were just spewing out mortals. I mean, that got fixed within like 2 days or something like that.
That was pretty absurd.
I think right now it's just feeling an eternity.
Quick. That was absurd.
Yeah. I mean, right now the Eldar thing feels like an eternity, but when we are rolling into the 10th edition, about a year, when we're like a year in, we're 2024, 2025 in. This is barely going to be a blip on the radar. This is the way I'm looking at it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, there's been, kind of like whispers and rumors in the dark, stuff like that. And it sounds like it's pretty good. I'm cautiously optimistic. But I know a lot of stuff is on their radar. And if all this stuff gets addressed or at least looked at, and the edition's only 3 months in, then I think we're going to be fine.
Yeah, and I think honestly, the game's still fun.
Yeah, it is fun,
and
that's why I'm going to Nova, even though it's going to be an Eldar hell.
Like it'll still be a blast.
Yeah, exactly. If you pair it to Eldar, you just kind of like disassociate a little bit, like.
Yeah, there used to be like there'd be moments years ago in in the basketball playing days when you just show up and you're like, oh, like this dude's just like 6'8" and quicker and faster and a better shooter and a better defender. So like, all right, this is not for me. He's just better. And I'm gonna attempt to pretend that this is a competitive game in other ways. And yeah, you learn to figure it out. Good one, man. Our favorite new Scotsman letting us know that food poisoning can in fact beat Eldar. Yeah, it seems accurate.
There you go.
If the other player stays home, you win.
Just rub some raw meat on his models.
Gosh. Oh man. So do you feel like you got Nova coming up? Well, first of all, like going into it, what are your goals? Are you showing up like, let's see how well I can do. Let's like see how this list can really do in a singles environment. Because I know it came out of like Germany's teams. I know from the last episode of Stat Check that like Germany's team did like exceptionally well in a way that their record didn't necessarily indicate.
Yeah.
What are you looking
that's
at
it. Yeah, Germany was a super strong team, and their placing, even though the placing was good objectively, like their placing also doesn't show like just how good they were. They felt real strong. I like their demon list and the CK list a lot. Both of them are just brutal and efficient, which I'm down for.
Love it.
I guess so like learning points I talked about after playing the GT, it was kind of like, okay, well, this going from like 10 dogs up to like 14, like at this point now I can just play like fixed. I don't have to mess around with the tactical game, get scammed anymore, that kind of stuff. And it plays primary super hard. So just to have that steady, reliable trickle of secondary feels good. So that was kind of like a learning point. So I'm looking for like more data points like that.
Yeah.
I'm also going to be really paying attention to any of the factions that are kind of in that 55 to 45% win rate, aka factions that I don't expect to drastically jump around the power rankings post data slate. I'm going to be paying really close attention to how those matchups go. So matchups like GSC and Eldar, I'm going to be like, okay, yeah, yeah, like that kind of stuff, like stuff like Tyranids or stuff like Sisters or stuff like that, or stuff like Eldar, GSC, stuff that's like above and outside the power band, above or below. Like I'm going to play, and if something insightful comes up, I'll make a mental note of it, but I'm not really going to be. I'm just going to be playing. But stuff that's a little bit closer, like Guard or Demons, or CSM and that kind of stuff. Obviously, I'm going to be looking to fine tune those matchups a little bit because those are the matchups I'm not really expecting to change very much post data slate. So that's useful data points there. I'm hoping that I can go back to bringing like one or two big boys post status slate. Depending on what happens, like if changes happen, the game gets more lethal, towering changes, because there's a lot that could happen. Like maybe towering, you don't get to see the entire board, but like maybe also the entire board doesn't get to see you. Maybe some of those points changes get rolled back. Maybe they don't. So there's a lot up in the air that could make it worth considering. I've been converting up that sick Lancer. I think if that guy's hideable, that could be
conversion looks so good, by the way, Tim.
Yeah, I had to put a plug in it because I had to finish hobbying for Nova, but I'm very excited to finish that on. But I think a single, if you do like a 110 build, I think like a solo Lancer, solo Cascader, solo Desecrator, I think those are all like super viable. I would love to be able to do like a 2-7 build or 2-8 build. And get some more big guys back in there. Like right now, the 14 dog list just feels optimal, and like obviously I want to, kind of see how far I can take this. So I guess that's the goal, is just kind of like just see like what the limit of the list is, but also it's like the army is like a 49% win rate army. I think maybe that's a little bit suppressed, but it's, and it's very much like a stat checky type army, but it will catch people off guard. It does play the Warhammer well. And it can definitely like catch people out that disrespect it. So, but yeah,
I just love
those are just
I
going
love
over the bod.
the nature of like 28 thermal spear shots. You're just like, here it is. This is happening.
It adds a lot of reliability. It is when you get, especially when like half of them move within the melter range, it is brutal. Like just straight like war crimes. It's a little bit rough. But yeah, it's and then all the OC8 as well. You know, you can if you need to, you can just dogpile, pun intended. You'll be like, okay, well here's 32 OC on objective. Like,
do you want it? I don't think you want it that bad.
Well, that's what I've always done with Necrons, because like I can't really kill Necrons. Like, my profile is like not quite right to kill Necrons, so but they can't kill me.
Right.
He's not fast, So I just deploy in line, and then if there's a center objective, I just get there before they do. They try it, and Lich Guard can wear you down because they can do the strat, and like now they get to like 8 AP2 and stuff like that with a high volume of attacks, winning on 5s with some rerolls. The characters are like flat damage 3, so they can kind of chunk you. But the Doomsday Arcs can't shoot at you if you're in combo with the Lich Guard with the blast. So as long as you just keep the Lich Guard, they have to choose if they're going to try to like wear you down in combat or if they're going to shoot with the Doomsday Arcs. They can't do both.
Right.
And if they run 2 Lich Guard bricks and they try to do the thing like one charges, the other one like falls back, one charges, the other one falls back. You save your CP for heroic intervention to immediately retag the other one. And you're like, nope. And so at that point you just screen out their like death marks and their tomb blades, so all the little tertiary crap like scarabs and that kind of stuff, so they can't do secondaries. And then at that point you're holding 3 objectives there too, and you can do home. You can be in combat and you just do homers because you're just eligible to shoot, and they just at that point you just run away with the score. But it's annoying because you can't kill them, but they can't kill you. It's fun.
Oh man, love it. Necrons playing the way that I don't know. I feel like the Necron playstyle actually does feel the way that they're supposed to feel. Right now, it's frustrating to run into for sure.
Yeah, it does. I mean, I think maybe the power band on needs to be a little bit adjusted, but it definitely does feel like how they're supposed to feel.
Yeah. What's your prep look like? So you've got got this GT under your belt. Obviously, you're a WTC, so you get to see it in action and do your own thing. What's going through your head as you ran into this, given those goals?
Honestly, as someone with a career, family, that kind of stuff, didn't really. One, definitely wanted to take a break after like a short break after WTC. Like I didn't want to play for like a week after that.
Yeah.
And I wasn't even like doing like the team event. But it was just the travel and the time zones and everything. I was just like, I don't want to say I was burnt out. Cliff left us skin on Adam when he gets back. I wasn't burnt out, but I basically just took. Welcome back, Cliff. You didn't miss anything.
Just the worst.
I took a week off, just kind of like not think about 40K. And then I was kind of like, okay, well, I'll play a couple games to get ready for the GT, and then the GT will be practice for Nova, and then if I get practice between the GT and Nova, that's great. But I mean, the GT ends Sunday. I fly out Thursday. Right. I have like 4 dogs that were like unpainted, so I'm probably just gonna have to hobby. So I really was, the entire time I was playing at the GT, I was really treating it as like practice for Nova, so to speak. And it was just basically kind of like just constantly just kind of rolling that momentum forward. It was kind of like, okay, well, the War Masters is practice for the Salt GT. The Salt GT is practice for Nova. Nova's going to be practice for Crucible Orlando. Crucible Orlando is going to be practice for GW Tampa. And just literally just trying to like roll that forward. Like right now, I think Chaos Knights are kind of like in that they're in that Goldilocks zone,
Mhm.
which is good because it means I don't have to worry about them getting
Okay,
invalidated.
yeah,
All
over the
their
next few weeks.
bad matchups is stuff that's like outside the power band anyhow. You know what I mean? The only other one would be like I think guard could be a rough matchup, but it's a little bit of a coin flip. That matchup's not free for them either. That's with 28 thermal spears, so it's very much like they're just as afraid of me as I am of them. So that one, like, you just hope you dodge or you just live the coin flip life on that one. Some people are not content to live with that. I am. It is what it is.
Yeah.
Better be lucky than good, I guess. Yeah,
Let the line go
that's that.
first. Here we go.
Yeah, easy. Game's easy.
Yeah. Roll sixes. Gosh. Are there like, well, I guess like, there's like other stat checkers going. What's on the social agenda for Nova, which I'm super sad about missing because it's right there. Some of my best friends live in DC. I've spent so much time.
Yeah,
I love
so
it. It's gonna be great.
So close to Philly. I think we're trying to find somewhere. I don't really have a head count yet. I was gonna try to get like a head count tomorrow, or whatever. But I was trying to see like somewhere that could like take like a party of like 10 people, or whatever. There was that ramen spot, but one of the local guys said they don't do reservations. I'm like, crap. No, we were all this close to greatness. But we're gonna try to find something in Adams Morgan or Georgetown that can do a reservation about 10 people. And I'm going to try to call ahead and just get someone reserved for like Friday night, I think.
There's a bunch of spots on U Street that also turns into like a haywire bar scene after the dinner hour run. Yes, if you can't find a spot in those two places, U Street's a good look.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out. I gotta look at the schedule and see kind of like what time we're out of there, because I figure like I'd like to get something like an hour after the last round ends. So I got to see what time that is. I'd like to catch like the tail end of the dinner rush, but before like it starts becoming like a bar scene or whatever. Because at that point, it's like you're not really sitting down for dinner, like while all these places are trying to do like their bar setup. So, but and then that way, yeah, because especially because you guys won't like you want to be able to all like sit together, kind of communally, kind of like talk to each other. But if it's just like a bunch of like, bar like stools and tables and stuff like that, it's not. You're gonna like break it up into small groups. It's not gonna be quite what we're going for.
Yeah.
We'll figure it out. I think right now we're gonna try to do Friday to do something. Some people mentioned Thursday. I'm like, bro, I'm gonna. I leave Fort Lauderdale at 6:15. The hurricane is going to be out off the coast of South Carolina at that point, so there'll probably be rain bands extending inwards. So our flight's probably going to get rerouted inland, because normally from Fort Lauderdale to Reagan, you fly like right up over the water to kind of like cut the angle. But we're going to get routed inland, so that probably adds about 100 fly miles to the trip. And then depending on what altitude those rain bands are, they might decide to deviate even further inland to avoid like turbulence or like convective activity or stuff like that. So I'm fully expecting the possibility that like this flight, maybe this 2-hour flight ends up becoming like, instead of getting to DC at like 8, maybe I get there at like 10 or something like that. So I don't want to like commit to anything Thursday night.
Right. Yeah. Plus, I mean, you may end up like me before LVO, where you're like, shit, I've got armature I still need to paint. Let me finish the basing up on this bad boy in my hotel room real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they were kind of had the base paints already. I just had to go paint. I had to sit down, basically spent like 4 hours and did all the brass trim just straight through, no breaks. That sucked.
Hero.
And
hero.
That sucked. And then I went back and kind of did like the metal piping and the chains on the top where the cockpit is and everything like that. And that's where and then I varnished them, and that's where they're at now. And then either after the show or tomorrow morning, I'm gonna do a quick oil wash and base. And then I'm gonna call them done. The little tabards like in the crotch or whatever, like they're not going to get done on those 4, or they're just not going to get done. I'll do them afterwards, but I can do the decals and everything, and that's stuff that can like be done later and applied. And then the weapons, a lot of the weapons are like you're just metallic, or they only have like 2 colors, not 3 or whatever. But same thing.
Metallic brush, or just metallic, like it's fine.
Yeah, but I mean, they're fine. The weapons are identifiable. You know, like the weapons on Knights, like the last thing I do. Because if you have details, it obviously looks good if you have the details of the weapons. But if the rest of the night is done, people like tend to like overlook the fact that the weapons aren't done. It's just you just dry brush the metal and you're like, okay, cool, done.
Yeah. Like, are we good? We're good. It's awesome.
Yep, pretty much.
C. Walensky. It's got a baby due November.
Nice.
X1 Life running through them already. Congratulations, and yeah, man, get ready for that X1 Life.
Yeah, get ready. It's is this the first kid? I'm assuming the first kid. Said he's about to feel X1 Life. Yeah. Cliff, how many kids you got?
2.
2. Yeah. How is going to 2 kids from 1?
It is. This will sound silly. It is simultaneously harder and easier than it seems. Harder because you're just like significantly limited. Your time is further limited in a way you didn't think was possible after baby number 1, kid number 1, and yet it is. And then easier because you're like no longer some like wide-eyed amateur with respect to parenting. You're like, oh yeah, I remember, like, there will be a time when I can sleep again. I know what this means. I know how to handle this. I'm prepared whenever we go out with the appropriate like materials and baby stuff. So it's like way chiller in that way.
Makes sense.
But yeah, the time is the time pressures are very real.
Prestige mode. Yeah, that's the thing I'm noticing because we only have the 1 kid, and he's 3.5 now. And we're definitely I can kind of see like the light at the end of the tunnel where it's like, okay, I'm starting to kind of get my time back and everything like that. With my wife and I working like weekends, and then she works night shifts. I looked out this year's schedule. I only have straight day shifts, which is awesome, but I still work the weekends. So even though it feels like we have to give like all of our money to daycare, like at least that's still an option. And he develops so much in daycare, which is great. He learns new stuff. But yeah, like the weekends, I still kind of have to like figure out stuff. So you have to do like the babysitter. Like, luckily, my parents are empty nesters. When my little brother, who's 13 years my junior, when he graduated, he joined the Marines. They basically made plans to kind of do a rotation and move and be close to each of the 4 kids for a while. And I think they were going to do me first because I was the oldest anyways, but then we announced we were pregnant, and then they moved the entire schedule.
And immediately.
Yeah, they moved that timetable up a year, and they ended up finding a cute little house like 5 minutes from us. So like it couldn't have worked out like any better.
Oh, that's great. Let's go.
Yeah, it was awesome. But my mom's like semi-retired, so she's still got to work, but it ends up working out pretty well now. So yeah, it's kind of getting to the point where like, okay, now I can actually like kind of like start going to events again, stuff like that, but I'm always like a little bit nervous because I'm like, Cindy, do you need anything? Can I leave? Are you okay? Like, well, can I do anything? Like, because I don't want to just be like, okay, see ya, and like the house is a mess, chores aren't done, something she's asked me to do for 3 months isn't done, like, and then you pile an event on top of that, so I always want to be. It's always a little bit of like we good? We good? So.
Are you sure? Or are you like just saying that we're good? Yeah.
No, she's super supportive, and especially after like WTC, like seeing like what the actual like fraternal community kind of like wholesomeness is like and everything, like now she really gets it,
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And then also the trip to Belgium, like that was just like brownie points for long time. That was buku brownie points. But yeah, so that's pretty much the plan. Yeah, Nova, just kind of see what happens. But I mean, I hate to say it because it sounds negative, but it's not. It's just kind of a fact. It's basically like a dead meta. You know what I mean?
I don't think that's. I mean, that's not wrong.
Like I said, I don't think that's a negative thing. I think if anything, that's freeing. Unless you're trying to win the thing. If you're trying to win the thing, now you're like, I gotta take Eldar. I gotta be the best Eldar player. I gotta function with the Eldar mirror, and it's a dead meta. Whereas everyone else is just like, wee,
playing free. Yeah, you're like, I'm
exactly.
anyway, so let's have a good time. See how well I can do with this.
but then after that, I was going to go to London GT, but we decided that would just be too much for the wife and Victor and everything like that. So I think maybe next year I'll try to do London GT. Who knows? It's definitely on my bucket list. I'm gonna do it within the next couple of years for sure.
Same.
But I had that time off already. So we're gonna split it up. I have a bunch of family in DC that I'm going to try to see this maybe like Sunday night. But if I can't, I'm going to be right back. They live down like in the Warrenton, Fauquier County area. So I'm going to go see them. But I'm also going to try to do Crucible, which is Orlando, which is a great major, runs every year around Halloween time. They have a unique thing where they do 3 days, 2 games a day. And so it's just really, really relaxed.
Chill. Yeah.
Well, because that's also they're right next to Universal and Disney. So like, and Halloween Horror Nights is going on, so it's nice because it's chill. And like, if you want to be able to get out of there and go do Halloween Horror Nights or Disney or stuff like that or whatever, you want to spend time with your family. It's a really good, like, I think for like that X1 like podcast demographic, it's really good for that because just man, doing 6 rounds over 3 days feels like luxurious. I don't know how else to describe it. I love it. It feels so great.
Yeah.
And then obviously GW Open Tampa, and then that's kind of it. Fall is usually kind of like when I try to like do like all my events because for South Florida, air traffic control is slow around that time because you're not really dealing so much with the weather. And then you also aren't really dealing with the tourists either. So it's just like a nice like dead period. And so it's just really easy to get time off and everything like that. And then I don't know, maybe depending on what the things look like, I might come up there for the narrative.
Do it
just to vibe with people.
Yeah.
And I'll just probably bring something that I want to run, but I haven't got a chance to run this edition, like orcs or demons or something like that. And yeah, that's it, man. That's pretty much my plan for the next couple months.
That's awesome. Picked up my tickets to Atlanta a couple weeks ago. They were like randomly inexpensive, so I'm pretty excited about doing that. Hitting the narrative and doing exactly what you just described. Just like I'm gonna bring something that I would like to run and see how it goes. Should be a good time. Also, just like love Atlanta, the city.
Atlanta's a fun city as long as you don't have to drive in it.
True.
If you have to drive in it, it sucks. But the airport is a little bit much sometimes, but it's great from down here because it's just straight shot, like an hour and a half, not even hour and 15 minutes flight, real close. And then you just catch an Uber into the city and have fun. I like Atlanta a lot.
Yeah, it should be fun. I'm pretty hype about it. All right, man. So gonna hit Nova and see how you do. Make that top cut per bin.
Man,
and, sing us the songs of 14 war dogs throwing thermal spears down across the board.
Spitting fireballs, man. It's so fucked up. It is a little messed up.
Gosh.
It's funny because like
no, go ahead.
You have so much firepower on tap, you don't actually really need the exploding sixes. If anything, I use the exploding sixes where it's just kind of like, okay, well, I'm gonna dedicate a third of my army to this part, and I'm gonna just to make sure it gets done.
I'm gonna smooth that out.
And then you set up the other 2/3 of the army to like shoot other stuff, but also to shoot backwards at whatever you're doing the exploding sixes in case for some reason you just don't. It doesn't do what you think it's gonna do.
Yeah.
But you just have so many activations. It's just absolutely absurd.
It's great.
So stuff like the orc lists with the it's got great profiles in the orcs, and like where the lists try to do like the things like the orc list is really the one that's doing it, where they try to like activation lock with like all the transports and everything. You just don't care.
Yeah.
You literally just don't care because you have so many activations where like they can't really. You only need to use exploding sixes if it's like something like a gargantuan squiggle at the -1
and
like
you're not going to get more than me.
Yeah, and you literally don't have anything else like worthwhile to shoot at. But like other than that, like you don't even need it, And you can just shoot, and then you pop a transport, and then like the chain cannons just like and the melts just like light up whatever comes out. The thermal spears are fantastic into Squig Hog Riders. They're fantastic into trucks. Chain cannons are just fantastic into generic orc bodies in general.
It's just good.
Because that list is scary. If they get on top of you, it can be a little bit rough. But you put a couple dogs forward, get them to blow the wog turn, and then you just back up with the rest of them. There's plays there.
Gosh, it does, man. I was hearing about some of the other. I mean, there's like that orc list that's just like, I win the game now because I own primary. Good luck to you. Oh, C. Walensky.
Yeah. C. Walensky, $5 super chat. Take my dang money. Appreciate you guys. We appreciate you, man. This past weekend, there was a orc list that went 4-1 at GT that I really liked. It basically it looked like a hybrid of the Team USA list, but then it also had like the big monster that I love. It was, I think, like 4 trucks off the top of my head. I think it was like 4 trucks, Gargantuan Squigoth, 2 beast bosses, 2 regular bosses, 4 units of beast snagga boys, 2 units of regular boys, 2 units of 2 5-man units of power claw knobs, and I think like 2 units of storm boys. So it was just like bosses and boys in boxes. But one of those boxes is Gargantuan Squigoth.
Yeah.
So which I own a Gargantuan Squigoth now. I'm not crazy.
Let's go.
I'm not crazy enough to own multiple, but I do own one now. So I'm like, yes, I'm part of the club.
Yeah. Gosh.
It's also I've played against them. Like I've seen them on the table before. I know how big they are, and yet when it showed up in my house, it was somehow like bigger than it's like I have a big head. It's bigger than my head. It's huge.
Yeah.
The thing weighs like 20 pounds too. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. So I feel I've got a Talnar in a box waiting to be assembled at some point when I feel like I'm up for the like multiple bolt holes and drill bits I'm gonna have to use to like really assemble that thing. I was just looking at it like, how do I even transport you? Like what?
This thing isn't even that hard to assemble. You just have to like saw off like with the resin like drain plugs or whatever, like where it went like feet and everything. It's not that bad. I have a small pull saw like for that kind of purpose.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, it's like body, head, tusk,
the brick of resin,
and then howdah, and that's it. Yeah, no, it's solid. It's like a solid body with like the legs, and it's just that's it. I'm like. It's a solid football of resin. It's so ridiculous.
Oh God, the one thing I wanted to talk to you about before we like jump into questions. Tyranid emissary / Norn emissary / assimilator. Are you also considering the hard pivot into big bugs as soon as that codex releases?
I will. I've been kind of like soft collecting some of the Tyranid bugs, just like onesies and twosies, especially because like the Tyranid half has been like super undercosted on eBay.
Yeah, very cheap.
So I'm just kind of like picking up some small stuff there, just like real non-committal, just like a little bit of scratch burning a hole in my pocket. I'm just like, yeah, I'll just pick up some stuff. So I got a couple of small bugs. I got the Neuro Tyrant. I got 3 of the Screamer Killers. I have one of the Neurophages, whatever. But yeah, I'll probably end up picking up some of the big bugs. I think I'll do some testing and proxying because they're a little bit bigger. I saw a picture running around of like the size comparison. It looked like it was a little bit bigger than an Armiger on a smaller base. So I'll try to find something that's like on an 8. Looks like it was on an 80 millimeter base. So I'll try to find something that's like tall and on an 80 millimeter, and we'll do some testing. But I think I definitely want to try like just the 6 Norn list, which will probably end up being like not good. But I'm just gonna try it, just kind of see what the limit does. Just do some limit testing, and I'll probably try something a little bit more like realistic, where it's like 3 Norns and then like
2 or 3, and then some other stuff,
and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I'll end up doing some testing and see how I like it. I don't know. Besides GW Tampa, I don't really have any events coming up. I'm going to throw my hat in again as a prospect for WTC, and so we'll be testing them for that next year. But between GW Tampa and then like WTC, I don't actively have anything planned. So it's mostly probably just gonna be like TTS and test games and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, if that's an option, like I'm definitely if Big Bugs become strong and I can throw my hat, for Team USA as like a big bug enthusiast, like I'm all for that. So. But yeah, that's the plan there. The data sheets look pretty decent. I need to see what their melee profiles look like. And I need to see if they have any other special rules. I love the special rule they previewed. The similar not having not having invuln that seems a little sketch. Well, because AP3 ignores AP3. Yeah, a 2-up save, but like AP3 ignores cover, or like AP4, like it gets a little sketch down, And then T11. Now it's just like, because I'm thinking about also like Chaos Knights, it's like, if you aren't getting cover, if the Knights can move and deny you cover, and then put you on a 4-up save, but they're winning on 5s because you're toughness 11 instead of toughness 6, because they're toughness 11, not toughness 12, and the guns are strength 6, and it adds up. And it's not the only strength 6 gun, so I could have to see a world where like a lot of strength 6 and strength 12 shooting kind of messes you up a little bit. But there's a lot of factors to consider. But like right now, it's the emissaries off the first glance seem like the ones I'd gravitate to. But like maybe like there's a world where like the assimilator could be like a rapid ingress threat or something like that. So because the rapid ingresses hits the +2 charge,
Yeah. So then start running into like, why not a Trigun instead, or why not another Trigun? Just for like bang for your buck.
Exactly. I have to see the whole book, but there's definitely a lot of ideas that floating around. And we'll test them and also kind of like see what other bug players are doing, kind of crib their notes a little bit, and then especially as the first couple, again, because I don't have any events coming up, so the nice thing is I can kind of sit back and I can kind of wait for the community to kind of solve for like the best list, and then I can either just straight up rip that list, or I can just rip the core concept of the list, or part of the list I like, and then put my own spin on it, go more into skew.
Yeah, I'm a little bit like I tend to be worried about widespread access to advance and charge across models with more than 6 inches of movement in general, and that appears to be an option. And I mean, it's like fun to play because you're running into this like essentially like, all right, you've got one turn, like figure this out. Like that might not feel good. Overwatch might assist with that a bit, but I don't think it's going to help a ton. I don't know. We'll see. Just the prospect of like 80 plus models rushing across the table, hitting you hard in a universe where folks are not necessarily screening as hard as they used to could be interesting.
Yeah. Well, especially because you can do the typical like overload thing where it's like turn 1, you're just moving up and you're trying to stage to just you're not trying to like get out in the open, you're just trying to stage up board a little bit but safely and give nothing to shoot at. And then turn 2, reserves come in, stuff steps out behind walls, everything pushes up, and it's kind of like, well, you get to Overwatch once.
One time.
What are you going to kill because everything else is setting up for charges or pushing in or whatever, like, and at that point it's just not enough, and it's kind of like you, instead of letting them get 2 turns of shooting at half your army, you just give them 1 turn of shooting at your entire army. And it's like, can you deal with this? If no, then GG.
Then lose. See you later. Oh god. All right. Let's jump to these questions.
Yeah, man.
He said,
pull up the thread.
Look at Discord without StreamYard being angry at him.
I got it pulled up. Excellent question, Locker. Here we go. Having a thread is so nice.
It is.
So from Grand 8, no question, just excited to meet Stat Check friends in person. I'm excited to meet Grant.
Oh, that's right. Man, I'm so jealous.
You should be jealous.
It'll be fun. I am jealous.
You should be jealous.
God, it's right there.
From Dan F, will Nova results enforce the fact for GW that Eldar are strong but not dominant? Is the breadth of GW's data gathering simulate any 40k data in the BCP or TTP app, which Static does, good or bad for the health of the game, and why?
Wait, there were 3 questions in there.
Yeah, there was like a bazillion questions there. Well, yeah, let's break that down. Will Nova results enforce the fact GW Eldar are strong but not dominant? I think at this point things are already set in motion. They're not going to get.
They know what they're going to do.
They're not going to. Yeah, they know what they're going to do. They might do some fine tuning based on Nova. I think the broad strokes of whatever balance passes, whatever happening in the balance pass, I think are at this point most going to be set in stone. I think they're probably just looking for like outliers. I think Stu Black's going to be at Nova. A lot of times they have the guys in the GW gray polo shirts with notepads. They'll like ask questions, or they'll kind of float around like the top tables, but occasionally go to other tables. And they have a way they want the game to look. So if they, in addition to balance, if they see a trend on multiple tables of the game just not quite like looking right, they'll delve further into that and adjust that as well. Case in point would be like back in the heyday when CSM was cultist spam. That's where we started seeing like the whole you can only take cultists per like battle line unit or something like that, per core unit, because it was the codex called Chaos Space Marines, not Chaos Cultists, or like Death Guard. You can only take one Poxwalker per core like unit or something like that. So even though some things aren't balance related, like they look for a lot of things in addition to balance, and I think they're mostly going to use Nova for like that kind of stuff. It's kind of like, okay, here's what we're going to do for the balance pass, and then Nova is going to be like for the peripherals of everything else they kind of throw in there as well.
I think if they're not big. Now go ahead, Sam. You finish.
Oh yeah, no, I was just wrapping up that thought. I think that's what they're going to do if anything. That's not based off anything. That's just based off like historical what I've seen in the past.
I think if they're especially proactive, they'll like assuming they're like, okay, Eldar, clearly a problem. We're going to do something about it. GSC, a problem. We're going to do something about it. Maybe a few other things that are making them unhappy about the structure of the game. If they're being really proactive, given what they know the changes are that they're about to implement, I would hope that they're then looking at like, okay, given those changes, what are some initial hypotheses about what we think will happen once that occurs, and can we see any instances of that playing out in any one of the like 1,000-ish games that are happening over the weekend, and just see like what are some potential things that they might want to start thinking about now before they become a problem 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks out.
I was muted. Exactly, because otherwise, there's a lot of stuff that is also problems that is just not used, and there's stuff in the GSC book, there's stuff in the Eldar book, there's stuff in the Custodian's book that are problematic, but it's just slightly worse than like what the metalists are taking.
Right.
And if you don't preemptively and this is where GW has to be a little bit self-confident, because when they hit those things that no one's taking, people are gonna be like, oh, what the heck? No, like, no one's taking these. Why are they hitting these? Oh, a typical GW, blah blah blah.
Like, well,
but if you don't preemptively hit those things, you end up with like the kind of whack-a-mole where like Eldar just shift to this, or Custodians just shift to this, or whatever. And we end up just kind of like with like 8 months of angst, like we did with Dark Eldar, where they just pivoted endlessly over and over and over again. So there's a little bit of like a holistic kind of view. They have to look at all that. Is the breadth of GW's data gathering simulate any 40k data entered in the BCP or TTB app versus what StatCheck does, 25 plus player GTs, good or bad for the health of the game, and why? I'm not really sure the telemetry that GW uses, but I'm gonna riff and hypothetical and clip. This might be a little more in your ballpark, so definitely take over if I'm just like talking nonsense. But I would like to assume that if they're looking at it, they're at least cleaning it up a little bit. Like if someone makes a bunch of games, but then like doesn't finish them, because a lot of times people will like start the app game and they'll play, but then once the game is kind of going to its logical conclusion, they just kind of get lax on like updating the scores and that kind of stuff. So it can cause a lot of like trash data.
Yep.
But assuming they have some sort of way to like clean that up, it's not necessarily bad if they look at that for balancing the game. I'm just going to keep talking until I can re-add Cliff. It's not necessarily bad that they balance off of that, because they are ultimately like they are balancing for the entire player base, not just the top 10% or the top 5%. So even though competitive tournament players can be good canaries in the coal mine, for finding stuff or identifying stuff that's problematic, they still at the end of the day have to kind of at least look at the games that are not ever making it to a tournament table as well.
Yep.
And it's hard because when you have people that are not playing competitively, and maybe they're not like really up to their rules, or they're just kind of playing like with their gut instinct versus cracking open the book, seeing how the rule works, and they're making substandard list choices, blah blah blah. I guess what I'm getting at is when you have two people in a tournament and they both know like why they're there, and they're going to play, and they're going to be sportsmanlike, but they're going to try to win, and they're both going to try to, like, at least in their minds, optimize the list. That's as close to an objective as you can get. And so when both players are playing objectively, optimally, that reduces the variability and allows you to kind of like solve for X better, But at the end of the day, it's like, to get philosophical, the game is for everyone. So they do have to make sure that the people that aren't doing that get looked at, even if it's a little more like subjective.
Yeah. I think there's will be a little bit of like toot our own horn. I don't think that there is a better, not even I don't think, there is not a cleaner set of data with respect to the competitive meta of Warhammer 40K than what we collect and display.
At least not publicly.
Not publicly, yeah. We have no idea what's going on internally with Games Workshop or anybody else like that. But Jeremy does a lot of excellent work cleaning that data. We all collectively look at it, and then we try to do a really good job putting out thorough analysis that covers a lot of bases, because we know that any individual data point is not useful for making large-scale decisions or drawing large-scale conclusions about the meta. Like, it's not just win rate. It's like, how often do they go 4-0? How often do they go 3-0 to start an event? How frequently is it played in the first place? Because like a faction that's being played by 1.5% of players but doing really well is not really yet a problem in the meta. How many points are they winning by? How many good matchups do they have? How many bad matchups do they have? Are they a gatekeeper faction? It's an 80% chance to win, which we simulate using a polynomial regression. Like, how it's getting an 80% chance to win a game. How many points do they have? Is there a spread between them? Like, we track a lot of these data points simultaneously, so we can talk in like a pretty, to use the word again, a pretty holistic way about save the meta and the competitiveness of any given faction. I think it's also worth noting that we do know that Games Workshop at minimum reads our stuff. And I would assume is also aware that on the website where they read our stuff, they can also find the dashboard that displays the competitive results for every single 5-round, 25-plus player game that's played in the world of Warhammer 40K. So that is I would hope and assume, and if they're not already, please be welcome to assume that Games Workshop is taking a look at our data too and using that to inform the larger aggregate data body that they're working with. Because to Tim's point earlier, the most competitive players identify the problems first, and then they go and play using the problematic stuff because they're trying to go and win games. And while folks that are playing in their backyards or random friendly RTTs or Thursday Night Warhammer over at their FLGS they're also trying to win. They're having friendly games, but that information makes it to them too. And those lists change over time, and that affects the play experience for both people that are new to the game and people that are old and people just trying to have a good time. So I think it's net positive that there's so many different kinds of analysis. I do wish that folks were a little bit better about presenting any caveats associated with either their data collection or the win rates associated with it.
Yeah. And I mean, just at a glance too, this quadrant here.
It's brutal.
So I can zoom in a little bit. Yeah, that is.
I love this chart.
I mean, this is like my favorite part of the data. I don't know if it was like I don't know if I was the one that came up with the like the terms or the ideas of the different quadrants meaning something generically or whatever, or I don't even remember, but
yeah.
I definitely remember when we had the conversation where we just kind of, when we had this before we had the quadrants, and I was kind of like looking at it and I was kind of like, okay, well, this top right is like the problem area. And so we just started talking about like anything that's top right is a problem, you know, blah, blah, blah. And then it was kind of like, and then we kind of, eventually we figured out, we're like, okay, well, you know, top left is like mid-table menace, you know, where it's like the army is carrying people a little bit, but it's the ceiling is the potential. Ceiling is basically another way of saying potential of an army. Where at a certain point, if you get high enough skill, the army starts holding you back. And that was kind of like the quadrant 1, the mid-table menace. Quadrant 3, it was just like, bro, even vets can't make it work. It's that bad.
Yeah. It's just
and then we had, for a while, that one of the quadrants was called like the what the fuck quadrant. I can't remember which one it was, but yeah. And then quadrant 4 was just kind of like, yeah, you can. Quadrant 4 is basically quadrant 2, but in hard mode. It was kind of like, you know, people who wanted to snowflake a little bit, and they wanted to win events, but they wanted to like have their skill expression too, and feel special about it.
Quadrant 4 is what you send to your buddies that play in that quadrant. In that quadrant right now are Dark Angels, Chaos Space. No, not Chaos Space Marines. Dark Angels, AdMech, and I don't know what that is. But that's the thing you send to your friends who play those factions. You tell them to get good.
I can say it's Dark Angels, Chaos Space Marines, Adeptus Mechanicus, Drakari, and Space Wolves.
Yeah, there you go. So if your buddies are complaining about having a hard time with those factions, just screenshot that quadrant and say like, "Hey man, you should like get better."
Yeah,
you'll do better.
Have you tried getting good?
And Mick13, thanks so much, man. We spend a decent amount of time thinking about it. We've got like again, toot our own horn. I don't think there's like a more sophisticated collection of people thinking about the metagame and the data with respect to like playing the game combined with like just like weird statistical expertise. We've got this odd combination of both of those things with like a lot of expertise on both ends, and that's great. So appreciate you, and hope it's useful. And always let us know if there's anything else you'd want to see or that would be useful in it, because we can do what we can to make those adjustments in real time.
I love the data. As someone who, again, X1 lifestyle, as a parent, as a father, husband, you know, career man or whatever, I don't really have the time anymore to really like lay the groundwork for innovation for a faction. And that's kind of where I see a lot of people kind of spin the wheels a lot, is they want to be the ones to lay the groundwork. Either if it's a new book or whatever, and when it's like a race, you know, and when it's a new book, yeah, everyone, you know, you have some people who like, you know, either are content reviewers or friends of content reviewers and have a little bit of an advantage. Eventually everyone ends up at the same spot.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be, and we talked about this before, we talked about the Stat Check Discord. Yes, it can be fun to play test, it can be fun to innovate or whatever. But when the book is solved, so to speak, and its matchups are known and its strengths and weaknesses are known, if you are still playtesting and trying to lay the groundwork for a solved book, you don't get to complain about not having enough time to compete, you know, because you need to be working on learning your matchups and learning your win conditions, your lose conditions, and like just getting reps and reinforcing your fundamentals of 40K. Not, you know, you need to get out of the lab. Like you need to put down the beakers and the graduated cylinders and stuff like that. That work has been done. It's been done for months. It's been done for weeks. right? And you're just spinning your tires. If you got a GT coming up, you can't be trying to like lay down the groundwork for a solid book like 2 weeks out. You need to be getting those reps. That army you don't know how. That army that you don't know how it works. Like you don't ever want to like have rep 0 be like round 4 to GT when you're tired, and then like next thing you know, you're back at dinner with your boys, and they're like, "Yo, what happened?" They're like, "Oh, I didn't know the faction could do that." Like, well, you could have if you just took a solved concept and like gotten reps with it, or like spent that time like finding a TTS game, like because if you don't find someone locally who plays it, or finding someone to proxy it, and you try to figure it out together, like, oh, no one plays Necrons locally, get with your buddies, be like, hey, let's just figure this out together. Especially if they're going to the event with you and they're worried about that matchup too. Like, do you know what this does? I don't know. Do you know what this does? Let's figure it out together. Let's both practice being op 4. I'll be the Necron player. You be the Necron player. You get to proxy a little bit. Do that kind of stuff. That is infinitely more useful than trying to like, reinvent the wheel, so to speak. Yes, innovating is fun, and do what brings you joy. Like if you have, I didn't mean to get on the soapbox here, but we're committed now.
It's a good soapbox too.
Yes, innovating, coming up with new stuff is fun. It is cool, but also you just gotta remember, like if you're a parent, or if you're a husband, or if you're just limited on time, your time is a finite resource, and you have to be. If you're not efficient with it, it will show in your results. So just something to think about. Where were we? Questions. Sorry about that. It's just like I don't want to say it's a pet peeve, but I do think it's one that I think it's worth reiterating, because I think a lot of times like I feel like I have to say that over and over and over again. Like it's okay to net list, if not full list, just net list concepts. Outsource the initial groundwork and innovation to people that have way more time than you. And then just crib their notes and then iterate based off that to kind of like fit it to what you like.
Let the 20 R&D. It's all good.
Yeah, you just take the shortcut. You meet them at the finish line, and then you run the last 100 feet. Easy. All right, Josh H. Without knowing what GW is changing, what do you guess the new Eldar win rate will be after the next balance pass?
55 to 65. So there's two scenarios. Scenario 1, they try to take a reasonable, thoughtful approach. They do like the most obvious nerfs, and then some light touches elsewhere. And then they drop 55 to 65. I say that because that book is very deep. And to Tim's point earlier, like there are options in that book that are great that aren't used because the existing options that people are using now are just outrageous, right? They're like really good. Why would you bother with anything else? Or scenario 2, they crater the whole thing and it sits at like 45 to 50, maybe, for the next 2 months. Like they really put them in the penalty box. I think the first scenario is more likely than the second.
Yeah, it depends. It's really going to come down to how hard they commit on points, really, because I think so. The big thing is that Eldar is, in addition to being undercosted and having the best stratagem that's ever been printed in the history of Warhammer, they are at the nexus of a lot of the feels bad mechanics of 40K currently. So you have blast, you have indirect, you have towering, you have dead wounds, stuff like that. So I think if they address all those core issues, like if dead wounds gets addressed, if towering gets addressed, if indirect gets addressed, I don't think it will, but if blast gets addressed, so all these are going to like nibble away at the core power of Eldar before you actually get to the Eldar nerfs themselves. And that could be like a cumulative like death by 1,000 cuts sort of thing. And like I don't want anyone's factions to be unplayable. However, I mean, we see it with Iron Hands, we see it with Six Flyer Admech. When one faction is like pushing everything else down, like the game just kind of like slowly dies, versus when one faction is underpowered, the game still lives. So, I mean, like, yeah, it sucks when you're a faction, if you only have one faction, your faction gets put on the ground. Yes, that obviously sucks. That's not ideal. However, it's probably best that they get put to 45% and then slowly built back up, to somewhere that's decent. And then once they kind of hit that Goldilocks zone, they're kind of like, all right, then they ease off of it. I think there is a real opportunity that they could do this right, just if nothing else, because of the scale that I think that this data slate change is going to be. Like I said, if they address towering, if they address indirect, if they address dev wounds, if they address blast, if Phantasm, let's say, I think Phantasm 2 CP and the timing changes to start of the phase, because that way the Eldar player doesn't have all the information, So it's like, okay, start of your movement phase, 2 CP Phantasm, boom, move. Now you start your movement phase with that information. Still powerful stratagem, but it doesn't just like immediately like brick your turn, And then the undercosted units get bumped up in points. Cumulatively, all those maybe probably like lands them in the right spot. It's possible, but also it's like the more levers you pull, the more variables you have in a problem. But I think like I said, if they address the core game issues that Eldar are kind of like the nexus of, Phantasm goes 2 CP start of the phase, and then they point 20% points to pretty much everything.
Oof.
I think at that point Eldar probably like land around like 45%, which is still very extremely playable. And at that point they can adjust from there. But if they swing and they miss, we end up in a dark Eldar situation where we're just languishing for like 8 months, So I think they're afraid of doing that, and I think they're going to come out swinging.
Yeah, I think so too. Strategically, it's the right move. Like you want to hit it too hard and then bring it back up rather than let it ride again for another 8 to 10 weeks. That's just not really doable.
Yeah, and I get it. It sucks. I've had armies that have been cratered. It sucks. This is why I always recommend having a couple armies if you're in this game for the long haul. But I mean, it just is what it is. I mean, can't let the game die. Ape of Justice James, preferred brew method for coffee. Man, for me personally, I just like a simple French press.
We use a coffee machine that has like a bird rind at home, so we just do that, and that's maybe not my preferred taste, but it's definitely the way I drink 99% of my coffee these days. It's good.
I don't know if it counts, but I love those nitro brews. But that sounds like something that like I wouldn't be able to do in my home.
At home,
like I don't know. It just sounds very exotic, whatever. Yeah. But they taste good. So, it's like feels like cold brew with extra steps. I don't know. I should probably look up how that's done.
It's so good though.
Yeah, they are so good. Frank, I asked in the main show too, but what would the Marine Codex need to have in order to make Gladius not the default detachment choice?
Interesting.
It's just Gladius just gives you just being able to like right click people's units and get full rerolls against them. It makes bad data sheets good, and it makes good data sheets great.
Mm-hmm.
And then even then, if you start bringing data sheets like Eradicators or that have full rerolls versus armor, or things like Lancers that get one hit reroll and one wound reroll, even then it doesn't even really devalue those, because now those can like split fire, so that you have that immediately. Then for the doctrines are great. You have, I don't know if that's tied to detachment or not, but like you have the advance and charge, you have the advance and shoot for the Devastator doctrine. Well, that might be army rules, but Gladius just, it's kind of like Invasion Force for the Tyranids. It just is such a good take all comer kind of thing. It's just a little too good at everything.
I'm not. you'd have to nerf it, right, and then do something with the data sheets and the codex to make
it's
viable.
it's at the point where like the codex would have to come out and it would have to be like Oath of Moment would have to be like reroll ones to hit and wound.
Yeah.
And then it stops suffocating other choices. Because like it's just combined with the rest of the rules, it just gives you a little too much of everything. And like that's the thing. Like once you have like data sheets or like, oh, this data sheet is a really great tool, but it just doesn't have enough muscle to get over the line. Well, it's like, well, then you just slap, Oath of Moment, and now it does easy. And just so many more things are just kind of like, okay, well, now I get this rule and I don't have to pay for it with output, or lack of output, because now I just slap Oath of Moment, I get the output I want. So
yeah, there'd be
that's probably
some core codex adjustments to like make other things relevant.
Yeah, because at that point, like once you get that kind of like power level, the only thing that really competes is just something that's like ludicrous mobility. So if there's another detachment there, just like a White Scars type of detachment, and it just has like insane mobility, then like you would see people go like Gladius for just raw power. You see people go for like the other detachment for mobility, that sort of thing, because you're either moving or you're killing people or you're doing both, like at that point. Because the way the game works is the game predominantly 40K historically likes killing power and mobility. Because when you have a unit that kills everything and then you have a unit that is durable and tanks everything, when they meet each other, the durable unit has to die. Because when it doesn't, the game breaks. The game blue screens to death. It breaks. People complain. Blah blah blah. Cyber Leviathan. Yeah. So that's why like usually damage and mobility are king.
Yeah.
So that's. I don't really know where I'm going with that, but yeah, I think you just have to be like a nerfed version of Gladius. I would say rerolls of 1 to hit and wound would probably be fine.
If you nerf oaths so that it's not as outrageous for everybody, then you have a little bit more freedom in on the detachment side. Because right now I think there actually is like I think the Death Watch detachment's better than Gladius, and I think that's because it's applying a level of
Amic set us straight. Oaths is the army rule, doctrine.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like you'd have to, in order to make, if you want more flexibility on the detachment side, you've got to do something about the core rule, because depending on what detachment stuff you're using, just throwing in with full rerolls on both ends of the like journey to successfully saving just causes too much trouble, right? Like you've got to do something about the core army rule in the core books, and then likely just tune up some of the data sheets that Oaths is like making up for, in order to add like more effective diversity on the detachment end.
Yeah, it's just the a lot of it's going to come down to the strategy and stuff like that too, because Gladius has really good stratagems, and then obviously it has a banger of an enhancement with the Bolter Discipline for the exploding fives. You didn't miss much, Cliff. I was just saying that banger enhancement, banger stratagem. That's the big thing with Gladius is it just has between the doctrines and the stratagems and everything. You just have so many tools and you're so adaptive, which is what Marines are supposed to be.
It feels good. I think the detachments feel good. It's just the oaths.
It's just kind of like it doesn't really feel like there's like any kind of drawback, we'll see. Yeah, I can see that. I would Turkey Baster says maybe remove the wound reroll from most, tweak the army from there.
That shit should be rare, man. Full wound rerolls is crazy.
Well, it feels like if anything, it feels like they have tied more stuff to the wound roll in 10th edition than in 8th and 9th. Because there's a lot of like +1 and -1 to wound. There's a lot of wound rerolls. There's a lot of reroll ones to wound. But it seems like in 10th edition, it seems like hit rerolls have gotten a little more rare. which ups the power of stuff like stealth a lot.
Yeah.
Like when you're -1 to hit. A lot of troop units in a lot of armies are like reroll 1s to wound, except if condition is met, then you reroll all wounds, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think they did that a little bit to combat the spread of like a lot of stuff getting higher toughness. Is they basically they made hit rerolls more rare, and they made +1 to hit more rare, and then they started tying more stuff to the wound roll, +1 to wound, -1 to wound, reroll wounds. So I think I see why they did that. But still, I think probably I think I'd go the other way with it. I think I'd leave the wound reroll, and I would take away the hit rerolls, because you have stuff like Inceptors. Inceptors are twin linked anyways. So if they lose the hit reroll, that's that is a big power hit there, but they still reroll wounds. And now it also gives you freedom of like, now you don't feel like you have to go for your OS target, but it also doesn't make them like just insane either.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's an interesting question. It's just what happens when you have like so many rules and stats.
Yeah.
As much as like, a lot of people like to blast GW, a lot of times I don't envy the job of writing rules for a game this complex.
So yeah, it's so hard.
That one guy, John, time limited, model limited, and bandwidth limited on deployment. How do I stay sharp, keep up with the meta to jump right back in a few months? So first of all, I would just say play straightforward armies would be the easiest way. If you're model limited, then Custodes and Imperial Knights are generally pretty evergreen. Those really don't change from edition to edition too much. I cautiously would say Space Marines. It's hard because like they're kind of an army as a subscription service, as Anthony and I like to say a lot. But maybe we're kind of getting towards the end of that with the sunsetting of the Firstborn line. And now it's just kind of like, hey, you got your heavy weapon dudes, you got your assault dudes, you got your characters, you got your tanks. It's just pretty straightforward, and they're just generically good at everything. I think 40K is still at its core, still 40K. You got your secondaries, you got your primary, you play the primary mission, you kill the other guy. If you commit too much stuff and you miscalculate the clapback, then the game can kind of just end a little bit faster than you're expecting. That's been pretty standard for the last couple editions. The hardest thing is that deployment, again, is the hardest thing to get right, because the feedback on deployment is usually so delayed that if you make an error in deployment, a lot of times you don't realize it, and you never actually get that feedback in a timely manner, and that feedback can get misconstrued somewhere else. So I always recommend re-rack sessions, because if you do re-rack sessions, you get that timely feedback on deployments in those first 2 turns. So play a simple, straightforward army. If you're really model limited, I would recommend Imperial Knights or Custodes to get you right back into it immediately. If you're willing to invest a little bit more into models and that kind of stuff, then I would recommend just Space Marines. They're very good straightforward army. And do re-rack sessions, and just simple game plan, do the re-rack, focus on your deployment, focus on your first 2 turns, and then just get those reps in and slowly just kind of, at that point expand from there.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nothing to add. It's dead
on. From Preston, how many bases can you fit in your mouth?
What size? 25s?
Yeah, what's that? I say it was 20. If 25, I feel like probably 50,
like
maybe
30, 40. 50
50
seems like a lot.
Yeah, well, I would die afterwards, obviously, but like I'm just saying, like max capacity. Like they wouldn't. I don't think they'd come back out after that. But like physically, they could fit in there.
Love it.
I don't know what's more impressive, like doing a bunch of 25mm bases, or like fitting like an entire night base in there, like just.
Oh, that'd be serious. Yeah, maybe the night base is more.
Maybe.
Impressive.
Yeah, I think like maybe I think maybe I can get like an 80 mil. I don't think I can go above that. Maybe a 60 mil. I don't know. Could you imagine like your wife walking in on you in that? And you like kind of
Like, I'm sorry, what is happening here?
or
Are you
worse, you get stuck, you have to ask her to help you.
Yeah. Oh God.
You have to explain. Yeah. What are these questions, man? Dan F, which 40K model has the best mouth feel?
Nothing from Forge World, right? Because resin's probably not. That's not great.
Yeah, no, I'm not putting resin in my mouth.
Um,
What's the roundest 40K model?
It's got to be one of the Squigs, right? One of the Squig Riders.
Yeah, maybe, but like without the rider on it.
Yeah. Oh, maybe
Yeah,
it's got all those spikes around it. I was gonna say, what's that Sigmar Eternal spell? That's just like a round. It's like purple stun. Maybe that.
oh, that thing's spiky.
Is it spiky? Damn it.
Yeah, it's like a puffer fish.
Oh, man,
I don't know. I think a Squig Hog rider, but then you don't put the armor on, you don't put the rider on. I think that would be my vote.
I got
From Richard, I'm due to play my first ever GT, but it's not until early next year due to childcare and family commitments. I'm really excited, but time is really tight generally. So, what are things I can start to prepare ahead of time aside from trying to finish painting my army? Are there any things that are good to have with you at a GT that help keep things going smoothly, whether with the game or on a personal level, keep you in better condition? Of course, 2 days. All right, I'm going to split this up. So, first part, time is tight. So, what can you do to prepare ahead of time? Best thing you can do, I would say right off the bat, is if you know what army you're going to play, know your data sheets cold. Just know what they do. If you're not having to spend time like looking them up or whatever, that helps so much. Like know your range profiles, know your movement values. I'm just going to keep talking until Cliff comes back. Know how many attacks you have. If you have like extra attacks, those are all good things to do. Like your war gear abilities, that kind of stuff. So know all that cold, and then also just see what people are doing. Like see what a successful list of your faction looks like. So go into the stat dashboard, go into stat check, see what it looks like, see what your good matchups are, see what your bad matchups are. I highly suggest just paying a couple bucks a month for a BCP subscription. That way you can go and you can basically you can filter it by your faction and be like, see what's going 3-2, see what's going 4-1, and identify trends of what a successful list looks like. And if you know your army cold, and then you identify what a successful army looks like for your army, then you can see those synergies. Also, shout out to Goonhammer right now. They are going through. They do this at the start of every edition, but they're doing a competitive focus on every single faction. Now that we've had some time to live with the new edition, everything like that, with example lists, and they basically talk about like the play style. They talk about what the army's trying to do. They talk about how it scores primary, how it scores secondary, what the kind of like the big moneymaker combos are, that kind of stuff. Those are really good things to get you acquainted. Once you know that, the next best thing you can do is learn what other armies do, so you don't get surprised at the table. And you basically want to approach every other army like it's an army you're interested in starting. Like, okay, well, if I'm interested in starting this army, how do I do it? And that will take time. But if this is nice because this is not something that you need to dedicate or carve out time to go play at the game store or your gaming table to do. This is stuff you can just do on your phone, while you're at break at work, if you're allowed to use your phone at work or that kind of stuff, or just, for like 15, 30 minutes, at night after dinner, that kind of stuff. This is just something you can slowly kind of accumulate and kind of get familiar with and be like, okay, what are other people taking? What are the common trends? That kind of stuff. And then once you actually do get your play time, that I assume is limited, now you can do the stuff where you definitely play some full games, of course, but like do the re-rack sessions so you can practice your deployments in your first like 2 turns. And at that point, if you've done everything else, if you know your data sheet's cold, if you know what a competitive looking army for your faction looks like, if you know what other factions do, what they're trying to do, that kind of stuff, and then you kind of like do those re-rack sessions to really kind of like, you know, get the nerves out and, you know, get the rust out, you know, do the little shakedown sessions, and you have a solid deployment, you have a solid first 2 turns, you're going to just generally do well, and you're going to be less stressed. You can focus more on just playing the game. I know that's a lot of work, but it is a complicated game. I know a lot of people try to make it sound like it's not complicated, but it's a complicated game.
Mm-hmm.
So those are all things you can do. That's kind of how you get to your fundamentals.
Yeah. Two things. One, very nuts and bolts related to playing the game that I think will help make it a little bit easier, and then one related to just like prep for events. One thing is like knowing your math cold helps a lot. Like knowing, given the units that you have in your army and what you would like to remove from the table from your opponent's army, just knowing like, okay, it'll take me, if I want like a 90% chance of this thing leaving the table, I've got to apply 4 thermal spears to it, 6 thermal spears to it, 5 with rerolls, like whatever that math looks like, you should know that, because that'll help you make decisions about target priority and sequencing really quickly at the table, instead of needing to like accumulate that through experience. And that you can do without interacting on the table, since you're limited for time. Just like bust out a calculator or just like roll it out while you're sitting at your desk, and see how it goes. The other thing for like prep is like comfortable shoes. If you can get, I have newfound respect for like supportive insoles after being in physical therapy for my Achilles tendons for the past 2 months. 2, prophylactic painkillers like Pops and Advil in the morning. You're going to do a lot of walking around. 3, eat high quality snacks. Get a good breakfast, not like a shitty one. And bring like some granola bars, fruit, random veggies if you can swing it. Try to find something tasty for lunch if there's a break on like a 3-round day, and stay hydrated. Like do all that stuff, and you'll feel a lot better physically during the actual event, which will help with your decision making and help your general stress levels. You'll feel better. It'll be great.
Yeah, and I'm gonna let's see if this works. I'm going to do a little something fancy. So that is a good point. It's something we talked about, or something I talked about with teammates when I'm practicing, and that is knowing your lines. You talked about knowing your math. I think it's a good little segment, little segue we can do is knowing your lines. What does knowing your lines mean? Well, it means when you look at your opponent's list, and you start thinking about this, because this usually comes up in deployment, you need to have a rough idea of, okay, well, what can I realistically kill? What do I need to kill? What can I kill? But then you need to make sure that you are kind of mirroring your opponent's deployment so that can happen when you need to happen. So what does that, Tim, what does that mean? Well, let's talk about it. Let's say draw a circle. This is, we're going to get really kind of abstract here. Let's say my opponent has a unit of, and this is going to be just addition agnostic. Let's say my opponent has a Death Star of Mega Knobs, and you're kind of like, okay, well, his Mega Knobs are super tough. I really only have one unit that can deal with them. You know, I have some shooting that can kind of like help, like, you know, push the math in my favor. But ultimately, I need to get my Terminators into his Mega Knobs, and that needs to happen on my terms. Well, you need to make sure that you don't drop your Terminators before he deploys his Mega Knobs, because if you put your Terminators, you know, over here, and then he puts his Mega Knobs like way the crap over here, and then they immediately start moving this way, well, now you're trying to like do this weird chase thing, you know, like that. Or if or for example, let me go back here. Or he does that, right? And you're kind of like, okay, crap, that's not great, but I'll move sideways. Maybe we'll just meet in the center. But then you are like, okay, well, he's got some armor, you know, he's got like some vehicles or whatever, you know, that are over here. Well, I need to get my shooting or my guns into them but then you kind of mess up and you kind of drop it over here. And what ends up happening is your Terminators have to go this way, but then your anti-armor has to go this way. See how they kind of cross over each other like that? Now, granted, in 10th edition, you can kind of move through units a little bit, but you can't have models occupying the same space, especially if you're trying to like hide them behind terrain, stuff like that. So what really needs to be happening is you need to make sure that as things are getting dropped, so people are going to generally kind of drop their screens kind of like this. They're going to drop their long range stuff kind of back here. Characters will kind of be like here, like this. But you need to make sure that as they're dropping their real kind of power units, the units that they're actually going to use to play the mid game, because this stuff up here on the front, all this stuff right here, the screens, that's early game stuff. Stuff that's in reserves or stuff that's like back here is like late game stuff. But the stuff that's really going to be kind of the meat and potatoes is this stuff right here in the middle. So generally all this stuff here, you need to have an answer for. And as they drop each one, you need to kind of answer it and mirror it. So that way you have good lines when you're lining your units up into theirs and you're not interfering with your own movement. Does that make sense?
Hey, let's go diagrams in real time. Teacher Tim.
All right. So that was a concept that was actually Sean Dayton that taught me that concept. And it was something that I kind of like when Susie said it, I was like, oh shit, like duh. But like because we were playing Orcs versus Slanesh Demons, and I wasn't really kind of like thinking about that. And like I ended up just kind of like crisscrossing myself, but just the same thing with like if you played sports, like when you're setting up picks or like that kind of stuff, or good defense or good offense, you have the same lines. It's the same thing. So in addition to knowing your math, know like what units you're going to set up, like your heavy infantry into their heavy infantry, or like your anti-armor into their armor, your screen killers, your blenders into their screens, that kind of stuff. Like you need to set up good lines. And if you're going to keep contesting a flank or whatever, you need to also kind of as you have one unit move into it, you need to have other units that are kind of like hidden, but like kind of following, they're kind of like pathing along the same way. So that way you can just kind of keep reloading over and over and over again, if you're going to do like a sustained assault, because once you run out, if there's nothing else in position to contest and they still have stuff to contest and you're trading 1 for 1, well, guess what? If they have 3 units, you have 2, and you're just trading 1 for 1. Eventually you threw 2 units away. You simplified it down, but now they just have it and you don't. Okay. Next question. And yeah, I agree with Cliff. Just comfortable shoes, sitting down when you can. Lots of water, some healthy snacks, and then maybe like some stuff like some Aleve or some Tylenol or that kind of stuff. And take it if you think you're going to have like any sort of like pains, like headaches or stuff like that. Water and painkillers, they work best when they're taken preemptively.
Yep. Take it in the morning.
Yeah. Right. So pre-hydrate, stay hydrated, and then, take your Tylenol, whatever, before you think it's going to be an issue. Because when you're trying to catch up, it's rough. Grant H, how many Thunderfire cans can you fit your mouth? Okay, did I miss something? Like
something's happening in the Discord.
Yeah, right. Grant, the answer is 1. I can fit 1 Thunderfire can in my mouth. There's no way I fit 2. Dan F, why does Vic hate Knight players so much? Is there just a number of insufferable Knight players dragging the phone ones down? Which 40k faction makes the best? Okay, that's 2 questions.
Oh, what's going on? I guess why does Vic hate Knight players? Oh no.
He called the 14 dog list stupid, which
I guess.
He also said he really liked Necrons in their current state, so I'm kind of like,
oh, okay. Come on.
So we can no longer take the position of like pretending we're objectively correct.
Yeah.
But it's okay. So again, we're gonna soapbox a little bit again. So fair means different things to different people. You have 2, and it's not 2 sides of a coin. It's more like it's a gradient or a spectrum. And I don't think anyone's truly at one side or the other, but everyone just kind of falls somewhere in between. So on the one side, you have people that think that when two people walk up to a 40K game, the person who has more skill should win 100% of the time. That is their definition of fair. On the other end of the spectrum, you think that you have two people who walk up, or you have the person who walks up, and he thinks that no matter what, no matter the skill level, that he should always have a 50% chance of winning.
50-50 shot.
50-50 shot. And both people are objectively correct. But both people cannot both things can't be true at the same time. But I mean, Warhammer is a dice game, but it is a game of movement and risk mitigation. So you can
clearly skill
risk mitigation. So there is skill that you can improve on there, but also there's sometimes it's kind of like, well, how bad can you react to events, or how good are you at mitigating risk? Because if you just over mitigate, then you won't actually get anywhere, because every single dice event, you basically have just taken the safest route and nothing happens except for your movement. You don't kill anything because you're not taking risks.
I think there's a little bit of a.
I think you and I are going to the same spot with it. So I want to preamble it.
Yeah,
so people who invest a lot of time in getting better at the game will naturally want to see payoff to that time invested. So they're going to fall more thing where they want to, I don't want to say they feel like they deserve to win, but because that's maybe that puts the wrong message out there, but I don't really know how better way to say it. But they feel that whoever has prepared more or invested more should win that game. Whoever's more skilled should win that game. And there's just certain armies that basically just are better at negating that or bridging the gap. And so stuff like Custodes, stuff like Knights, stuff like Monster Mash Demons or Monster Mash Nids, because they have such high stat values, stuff like that, and they, stat check people, they're very good at kind of like quickly narrowing the gap, where it's just basically kind of like, hey, a mid-level player can kind of bridge the gap by being like, okay, well, I know that if we have like a ton of little, resource management, kind of economy wars, and a bunch of like micro decision wars, stuff like that this guy's just going to like slowly kind of like nickel and dime me all the way to a victory. But if I take these big lumbering steps where I'm just like, oh, a big dice roll, big dice roll, big dice roll, and I'm competent enough to know what I need to do to win, but not hyper competent enough where I can keep up with all these little micro decisions.
Right.
Then if all of a sudden I just crack the game wide open with a big, huge dice roll, a big, huge monster, big, huge knight, whatever, stuff like that, then at that point, I can get ahead, and then I can focus on preserving the scoreboard and just trying to like lock the opponent out of the game. And the guys who love those hyper MSU jank armies, that kind of stuff, where they want to just finesse their way to a victory because they've just put tons and tons of reps, they hate that shit. They hate it so bad. Well, guess what? If you are a dad, if you are a husband, or if you just like have hobbies besides 40K, like maybe you just love mountain biking or you love scuba diving or whatever, and you want to like, win more than 50% of your games, but you don't want to invest all your life into this, or you're unable to, guess what armies you need to be playing? Those types of armies. That's what we lovingly call big boy time.
Yeah.
Because it really rewards people who are just good enough to understand the fundamentals, competitive 40K, and understand like win conditions and loss conditions and like screening and primary and secondary and, being aggressive versus playing safe and when you need to do both, whatever. But maybe you aren't on like the upper end of the bell curve where it's just kind of like, the ins and outs of every single little matchup. You know how to manage like 3 different economies and like 2 different resources and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff, because I don't know about you, I don't get played to be good at this game. I don't live in a stream house, like I don't, I'm like aggressively like decent at the game, but I think that's a lot of people, like
I love
that's a lot.
Description. Aggressively decent. I love that.
Yeah, like it's like I've been playing for a long time. Like I kind of like, eventually, you kind of like learn the fundamentals and you can kind of just play good Warhammer. But that's the thing. Like I just try to show up and just play the good Warhams. But it's getting harder and harder to keep up. And these guys who just have tons of time, they definitely get rewarded, by these armies that have lots of little tiny decision points because they have had so much time to master and so many reps to master that. Again, though, you tend to kind of get, a little bit of an echo chamber where you think that's the only valid way to play the game. So, and I think, and we're going to get him on he's deployed to Louisiana right now. He does I forgot what he does. He's a Mark Parker, teammate of mine, good friend and everything. I call him the grandfather of Bunga Bunga, and we'll get him on the show. We just got to make sure he doesn't talk about politics. But besides that, we'll give him the 40K because he will boom super hard. But he is like the father of Bunga Bunga, and he loves it. And I kind of adopted that love from him, where it's just like there's nothing sweeter than when you beat someone. And as you're kind of doing the thing where you're packing up all your stuff and you go to the score, you'd be like, yeah, well, I just like to think when I win or everything, you're just like,
they're sounds cute, man.
Oh man, I when people say that, I just shower and I love it so much. When they're just like, oh, this army is stupid, or I just like to think when I win. I'm like, as soon as I hear them getting ready to say it, I'm ready for it. I'm ready to just eat it up. I love it.
Actually, I don't know. I appreciate this take from Vic because I think it sets up a hot take that I have about the game, which I've said before in the Discord, which is that I think there are elements. Some people who are very good at this game are good at it in a way that's akin to mechanical exploits that you find in video games, where if you stand here, then the computer opponent can't target you, and as a result, you can it's less about are they, and usually it's on top of them being really good at risk mitigation in movement, in planning, in understanding the matchup and getting things out. But every now and then you run into somebody, and this has happened to me before, I'm just oh, this person's good. And you're are they? Did they just find a cheat code that we're broadly unaware of? And we show up and you're oh shit, I didn't know that was on the table. I have no way to prepare for that. That seems odd. And now I've lost because it was a key moment in the game. This exploit was introduced. I was unaware and unprepared for it, and now I lose. Cool. And there are some armies that lend themselves to a play style that identifies those exploit points. And I think that the Venn diagram between people who like finding those exploit points and like the big brain armies is this. And that is very, very far away from what I think the idealized state of the game looks like. Because I remember in ninth all the weird mechanical close combat shenanigans where I was just wow, this is really impressive. And also wow, 90% of players have no clue what's happening. And if you busted this out on them at the table, they'd be oh, I guess I just lose this combat now. Why did I even charge? That feels bad. And the sort of thing that should not, in fact, be part of a game whose core mechanics rest on risk assessment, decision making under duress, and movement in space. That's all.
Yeah, I think definitely that to that effect. Probably the melee between the melee should probably be somewhere halfway between what it was in ninth and what it is now.
Yeah,
I get what they're trying to go for, but I think it's just
it's a little too. It's still there's some element of exploitation to it, but it's a little too simple.
Exactly. It'd be a little bit clunky, but I mean that's also a little bit of definitely a side tangent. But yeah, that's the thing. It's just there's armies in the game that are simple but have these big spiky dice rolls, and it's kind of hey, if I fail too many dice rolls, the game just ends. But if I make a bunch of these dice rolls, it's call an ambulance, but not for me, that sort of thing.
Then I win.
And you hear it all the time, from kind of top level players when they're playing someone that they think is a bracket or two below them. They just hate it when that type of player goes for a low percentage charge that they have no business going for, and then they make it, and they're like, shit, like they hate that shit. They hate that shit, but it's like
it's only a 15% chance. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but it's like, is that other player, is he doing that because he doesn't know that it's a low percentage, or that he knows that
if I hit this, it's over?
If you hit this, is over, because like when you're punching up into like someone whose skill level is above you, the longer the game goes, the lower the percentage you winning that game is.
Right.
Straight up, So I mean, by all means. I mean, unless you're down for it, like by all means, don't deploy in the line. Be like YOLO, but like unless that's the only way you can win. But I mean, if you do, then go nuts, I guess.
If I'm playing, I was about to say, if I'm playing Anthony, I'll deploy on the line. I'm like, no, that'll go south. Also, like that'll go.
Yeah. Oh. Well, I mean, sometimes that doesn't get you anything. Like against Anthony's CSM list, like that list like null deploys. It's like, hey, one thing's shootable, one CP. Now it's not. Good job. Now you're closer to him, and the game just ends. But I mean,
like I gotta gamble. Like I can either guarantee lose this game over the next 5 turns, or I can attempt to win it now, knowing that there's a skill difference. Like
exactly, and I mean, there's a little bit of skill to like knowing and recognizing that as well. And that is, I think that is where like teams and everything kind of helped me out too, because like that was something I considered on like the player to player level, but I don't think I ever really took into account at the faction to faction level. I mean, like there's usually always like 2 armies that are above and beyond everything else, and then there's a couple, like there's like 1 or 2 armies that's kind of like, if you see them, it's like a free lunch. But I never really paid attention to everything in the middle. Now I really do, and like granted, it's a little bit easier to say now with a singles meta being what it is, where everything's so binary. But yeah, like in War Masters, I paired into IK, and I literally just deployed in the line. I was like, well, if I try to play a real game, I think I just lose.
Yeah.
So I just deployed in the line, and then I went first, and then I killed him in 2 turns. Easy. From Gabe C. When we're drinking old fashions at the bar after playing double rake 9 on day 1, what type of whiskey brand are we going with? For old fashions, I like Makers.
Yep.
But any good bourbon will be fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I do love old fashions.
Just booze. Booze to the face.
Apply booze to face. Grant asked us to live react to the Nova reveals since we're having right before the show. Sorry we didn't give you a live react. But we didn't talk about the reveals. I'm here for the biggest piggest, man. I'm gonna turn that guy into.
That model looks great, man.
I love the Feral Orc aesthetic, so I use the Orc Brutes for my knobs.
Nice.
I convert all of them. I cut those guys at the wrist, add like power claws and stuff like that. Even though I do like the squig models and stuff like that, I definitely kind of like the idea of converting, they're just a little too big and too armored, but I would definitely like to eventually convert the Orc models into boys, and then I'd love the Beast Snag as they stay as is, but then have the Boar Riders as the Squighog Riders, and then have the biggest piggest as my Beast Boss on a dinosaur, or Beast Boss on a Squigosaur. Like that seems dope. Because even though my orcs are painted like Death Skulls, I think Snake Bites are like my favorite. I just love the Feral Orc vibe.
Yeah. I think AOS continues the long tradition now of them just having straight better models than like every other Games Workshop has going. That like old timey Trog leader that they busted out, that model looks gorgeous.
Or that Manticore looked
Manticore is unreal.
Sick.
The Cities of Sigmar line broadly is like fucking slamming. Like it looks so good.
If you are a Sisters player, I think there's some real crossover there. If like for like the more like the penitent side of the stuff, like the Arcoflagellants, the Preachers, the Pendant Engines, stuff like that. I think there's some real conversion fodder there. I'm excited to see what people do with it. More stuff about booze, pictures of booze, some funny gifs. Still talking about booze.
Come on, guys.
Man, this chat is going sideways. More gifts. More gifts. How important is it that I freehand old painless on my Terminator's assault cannon? I'd say very important. You should do that. That is it for the questions. Let me scroll through, make sure I didn't miss anything in the live chat. Grant says he's got some trim left on the obliterators and blue scribes. He is done. Hell yeah. I just got an oil wash and base for my 4 dogs, and then I'm done.
Let's go.
Done enough. Cool, man. That is it. Yeah, I'm excited to see everyone tomorrow / Friday. It's kind of weird. I'm like not packed at all. So it's going to be interesting being in DC 24 hours from now. At least I'm checked in on the flight.
Hey.
Yeah, not bringing any luggage. I'm just literally just army in one hand, a backpack with clothes and toothbrush in the other. Just try to make this quick, like get in, get out, socialize with the homies, roll some dice. Maybe if I see something I want to buy, sneak a box or 2 home, but maybe a blade. My Custodes collection is missing Blade Champions. I can't find those things anywhere. So if they're selling them there, I'll probably pick up 2, and then that's Custodes done. And then that's nice because it won't take up a lot of room in the bag. That's it, man.
That's sick, man. I'm excited for you. Excited for your listen to it. Excited to follow how it goes. Excited to hear about it.
Yeah, man. Excited to talk bugs when the codex comes out, man. We'll be talking about that a bunch.
So excited about that because I love big bugs.
I love the kaiju energy.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, it's late. I'm gonna let you go to sleep. I'm gonna let our viewers go to sleep, and I will stall while I try to look for this outro. And there it is. And I will see you guys in the Discord. So everyone,
sticking with us. Safe travels, Tim.
Yeah, man. See you guys at Nova, or see you in the Discord.